Rachel Martinez clutched the manila folder against her chest as she walked through the imposing marble corridors of the Hamilton County Family Court. Her worn black flats squeaked slightly against the polished floor, each step echoing her mounting anxiety. The folder contained every financial document she could gather: bank statements showing a checking account balance that barely covered rent, credit card bills that made her stomach churn, and employment records from her part-time job at the local community center. She glanced down at her outfit, a navy blazer she had purchased from a thrift store 3 years ago, paired with dark slacks that had seen better days. The fabric was clean but tired, much like Rachel herself after 18 months of navigating the brutal divorce proceedings that James had dragged out with his seemingly endless legal maneuvers. I wonder where all of you watching this are from, because no matter what state or country you are in, family court can feel just as intimidating and overwhelming as what Rachel was experiencing that cold Tuesday morning. Please comment below and let me know where you are watching from, because this story is about to show you that sometimes the people who appear most confident in these courtrooms are hiding the biggest secrets. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 3B loomed ahead, and Rachel took a steadying breath before pushing them open. Inside, the room felt cavernous with its high ceilings and dark wood paneling. Rows of empty benches stretched behind her, while the judge's bench dominated the front of the room like a fortress. The air smelled of old leather and floor wax, carrying an almost sacred silence that made every footstep feel amplified. Rachel made her way to the plaintiff's table where her court-appointed attorney, Marcus Webb, was already seated. Marcus was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a suit that had clearly seen many courtroom battles. He offered her a weary smile as she sat down, but his expression carried the weight of someone who had been assigned too many cases with too little time to prepare for each one. "Good morning, Rachel," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper as he shuffled through a stack of papers. "I have to be honest with you, James's legal team has been quite aggressive in their filings. They are claiming significant financial hardship since the divorce and demanding substantial monthly support." Before Rachel could respond, the courtroom's double doors swung open with dramatic flair. James Lawrence strode in like he owned the building, his Italian leather shoes clicking confidently against the floor. At 42, James still maintained the physique that had initially attracted Rachel during their college years, though now his perfectly styled dark hair and expensive charcoal suit gave him an air of arrogance that made her skin crawl. Behind him followed his attorney, Victoria Sterling, a formidable woman in her early 40s whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had earned her both fear and respect throughout the local legal community. Victoria wore a tailored burgundy suit that probably cost more than Rachel earned in 2 months, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and calculating green eyes. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a case she truly wanted to win, her heels clicking in perfect rhythm with her client's stride. James glanced over at Rachel with a smug expression that barely concealed his satisfaction. He leaned toward Victoria and whispered something that made his lawyer nod approvingly. Even from across the aisle, Rachel could see the gleam of his expensive watch and the subtle shine of his perfectly manicured fingernails. "Look at her," James murmured to Victoria, his voice just loud enough for Rachel to hear. 3 years out of our marriage, and she is still playing the poverty card. We both know her family has more money than they know what to do with." Victoria Sterling placed a perfectly manicured hand on her client's arm, a gesture that appeared supportive but was clearly meant to remind him to keep his voice down. She opened her leather briefcase with practiced efficiency, removing several thick folders that she arranged on their table with military precision. The bailiff, a stocky man with graying temples and kind eyes, called out in a booming voice that filled every corner of the courtroom, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Thornton." Judge Thornton entered through a side door, her black robes flowing behind her as she took her place behind the imposing bench. At 58, she had earned a reputation for fairness tempered with impatience for legal games and courtroom theatrics. Her silver hair was cut in a practical bob, and her sharp brown eyes seemed to take in every detail of the scene before her as she settled into her chair. "Be seated," Judge Thornton announced, her voice carrying authority that immediately commanded respect. We are here today for the alimony determination hearing in the matter of Lawrence versus Martinez. Counsel, please state your appearances for the record. Victoria Sterling rose gracefully, her voice smooth and professional as she addressed the court. Victoria Sterling of Sterling and Associates, representing the petitioner James Lawrence, Your Honor. Marcus Webb stood more slowly, his movements betraying his nervousness. Marcus Webb, court-appointed counsel for the respondent Rachel Martinez, Your Honor. Judge Thornton nodded and consulted the file before her. Mr. Lawrence, you are seeking monthly spousal support in the amount of $8,000. That is quite substantial. Please present your case. Victoria Sterling approached the podium with the confidence of a predator who had already spotted her prey. She placed her notes carefully and looked directly at the judge with unwavering eye contact. Your Honor, my client dedicated the best years of his life to a marriage where he served as the primary breadwinner while supporting his wife's lifestyle, which was substantially funded by her family's considerable wealth. Since the divorce, Mr. Lawrence has experienced significant financial hardship, while Ms. Martinez continues to have access to family resources that she has deliberately hidden from this court. Rachel felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and frustration. She had never hidden anything from anyone, least of all resources she did not possess. Her family, hardworking immigrants who had built a small but successful restaurant business, had helped her as much as they could during the divorce, but they were far from wealthy. During their marriage, Victoria continued, her voice growing more authoritative with each word. Mr. Lawrence made substantial sacrifices to accommodate his wife's expectations regarding their standard of living. He took on additional debt to maintain the lifestyle that her family connections had led her to expect. Marcus Webb scribbled notes frantically, but Rachel could see the overwhelmed expression on his face. He had been assigned to her case only 2 weeks earlier when her previous public defender had been reassigned, and the complex financial claims that Victoria was presenting seemed to catch him completely off guard. James sat at his table wearing an expression of wounded nobility, occasionally shaking his head sadly, as if the entire proceeding was a tragic misunderstanding caused by Rachel's selfishness. He had perfected this look during their marriage, the same expression he wore whenever she questioned their mounting credit card debt or suggested they needed to budget more carefully. Your Honor, Victoria said, her voice taking on a tone of regretful necessity, we have documented evidence showing that Ms. Martinez has access to family trusts and investment accounts that she has never disclosed to this court. While my client struggles to maintain basic housing, his former wife continues to benefit from generational wealth that she claims does not exist. The words hit Rachel like physical blows. She wanted to stand up and scream that every word was a lie, that she had worked 2 jobs during their marriage while James pursued one failed business venture after another, that she had never seen a trust fund or investment account in her entire life. Instead, she sat frozen as Victoria Sterling continued her methodical destruction of her character and credibility. Victoria Sterling moved with calculated precision as she approached the evidence table, her burgundy suit catching the courtroom's fluorescent lighting. She lifted a thick manila envelope with the reverence of someone handling a sacred artifact, though Rachel could see the predatory gleam in her green eyes. Your Honor, Victoria announced, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom, I would like to present Exhibit A, which contains comprehensive financial documentation that will clearly demonstrate the substantial assets that Ms. Martinez has deliberately concealed from these proceedings. Judge Thornton leaned forward slightly, her expression sharpening with interest. The silver-haired judge had seen countless cases where divorcing spouses attempted to hide assets, and her experience had taught her to pay close attention when such claims were made with this level of confidence. Victoria opened the envelope with theatrical precision, removing several documents that appeared to be official bank statements and investment portfolios. The papers were crisp and professional-looking, bearing the letterheads of prestigious financial institutions that Rachel had never heard of, let alone conducted business with. These documents, Victoria continued, show a pattern of financial deception that spans the entirety of Mr. Lawrence's marriage to the respondent. Ms. Martinez has maintained multiple accounts with Whitmore Private Banking, an exclusive institution that caters specifically to high-net-worth families with generational wealth. Rachel felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Victoria display documents that supposedly bore her name and signature. The papers looked official and convincing, complete with account numbers and transaction histories that painted a picture of someone with access to millions of dollars in family money. Marcus Webb shifted uncomfortably in his chair beside Rachel, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose as he squinted at the documents being presented. His court-appointed status meant he had limited resources for investigating such claims, and the sophisticated financial records that Victoria was displaying clearly exceeded his expertise in white-collar financial matters. As you can see here, Victoria pointed to specific lines on what appeared to be a quarterly investment statement. Ms. Martinez received regular distributions from the Elena Martinez Family Trust, established in 1987 by her grandfather's textile import business. The trust has consistently generated substantial returns, providing Ms. Martinez with a monthly income that far exceeds what most families earn in a year. The name Elena Martinez was indeed Rachel's grandmother's name, but the elderly woman had worked as a seamstress in a factory until her death 5 years earlier. The idea that she had established any kind of family trust was so absurd that Rachel almost laughed out loud. Except that Judge Thornton was studying the documents with the serious expression of someone who found them credible. Furthermore, Victoria's voice took on a tone of righteous indignation. During their marriage, Ms. Martinez used these hidden resources to maintain a standard of living that my client could never have afforded on his income alone. When he questioned their spending patterns, she would claim that her family was simply generous, never revealing the true extent of her financial resources. James nodded gravely from his seat at the defense table, his expression carefully crafted to suggest wounded dignity. He had practiced this look in front of their bathroom mirror during the final months of their marriage, perfecting the art of appearing noble while telling lies that would have made a politician blush. Your Honor, if I may call Mr. Lawrence to testify regarding his first-hand knowledge of these financial arrangements, Victoria requested, her tone suggesting that James's testimony would provide the final piece of irrefutable evidence. Judge Thornton gestured toward the witness stand. Mr. Lawrence, please approach and be sworn in. James rose from his chair with the measured movements of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, and his Italian leather shoes gleamed as he walked across the courtroom's polished floor. Even his posture suggested confidence and reliability, the bearing of a man who had never been caught in a lie. The bailiff stepped forward with his weathered hand holding a worn Bible. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? I do, James replied, his voice steady and clear as he settled into the witness chair with practiced ease. Victoria positioned herself at the podium with the satisfied expression of a chess player who was several moves ahead of her opponent. Mr. Lawrence, during your marriage to Ms. Martinez, were you aware of her family's financial resources? James turned slightly toward Judge Thornton, making direct eye contact with the composed expression of someone sharing a painful but necessary truth. Your Honor, I discovered the extent of Rachel's family wealth gradually over the course of our marriage. At first, she would make comments about her grandmother's business success, but she always downplayed the actual amounts involved. Rachel's hands clenched involuntarily in her lap as she listened to James fabricate an entirely fictional version of their relationship. Her grandmother Elena had indeed been proud of the small alterations business she had run from her basement, but the idea that it had generated millions of dollars was pure fantasy. She would receive phone calls from what she claimed were family financial advisors. James continued, his voice taking on a tone of long-suffering patience. When I would ask about our budget or suggest we needed to be more careful with spending, Rachel would become evasive and claim that her family preferred to keep their financial arrangements private. The lies flowed from James's mouth with such smooth conviction that Rachel began to doubt her own memories. Had there been phone calls she had forgotten about? Were there conversations that she had misinterpreted? The manipulation was so subtle and complete that it made her question her own sanity. Mr. Lawrence, Victoria prompted, can you describe specific instances where your wife's hidden wealth affected your marriage? James paused for a moment, as if gathering the emotional strength to share painful memories. During our second year of marriage, Rachel insisted that we needed to move to a larger apartment in an expensive neighborhood. When I expressed concerns about the cost, she assured me that her family would help with expenses. This was completely false. Rachel remembered that conversation clearly because James had been the one pushing for the expensive apartment, claiming that his potential business clients needed to see that he was successful. She had been the one urging caution about the higher rent. She would often make expensive purchases without consulting me, James continued, his voice carrying a note of wounded bewilderment. Designer clothes, jewelry, weekend trips to expensive resorts. When I questioned these expenses, she would say that her family expected her to maintain certain standards. Judge Thornton was taking notes, her expression suggesting that James's testimony was reinforcing the documentary evidence that Victoria had presented. The combination of official-looking financial records and James's convincing testimony was creating a narrative that painted Rachel as a deceptive spouse who had used hidden wealth to manipulate her marriage. Marcus Webb finally stood up, his movement awkward and uncertain. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is testifying about hearsay regarding alleged family conversations and financial arrangements that have not been independently verified. Victoria Sterling's smile was predatory as she turned toward Marcus. Your Honor, Mr. Lawrence lived with the respondent for 5 years. His direct observations about her spending patterns and family communications constitute personal knowledge, not hearsay. Overruled, Judge Thornton announced. Mr. Lawrence may continue with his testimony regarding matters within his personal knowledge. Rachel felt the courtroom walls closing in around her as James continued his methodical destruction of her reputation. Every word he spoke was a masterful blend of truth and fiction, taking real events from their marriage and twisting them into evidence of financial deception that had never existed. The most painful part was watching Judge Thornton's expression grow increasingly stern as she absorbed James's testimony. The respected jurist was clearly forming an opinion based on what appeared to be overwhelming evidence of financial fraud and marital deception. Marcus Webb was frantically scribbling notes as James continued his testimony when his phone began vibrating insistently against the wooden table. The court-appointed attorney glanced down at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number with a 312 area code. Under normal circumstances, he would have ignored any call during court proceedings, but something about the timing made him hesitate. Your Honor, Marcus said, rising awkwardly from his chair, I apologize for the interruption, but I need to request a brief recess. I believe I may be receiving urgent information relevant to these proceedings. Judge Thornton's expression showed mild irritation at the interruption. Victoria Sterling looked positively annoyed that Marcus had dared to interrupt James's compelling testimony just as it was reaching its most damaging crescendo. Mr. Webb, this is highly irregular, Judge Thornton observed, her silver eyebrows drawing together in disapproval. Your client's case would benefit more from your attention to the current testimony than from phone calls. I understand, Your Honor, but this call appears to be from a private investigator who has been conducting research into the financial claims being made in this case. I believe the information may be directly relevant to the testimony we are hearing today. James shifted uncomfortably in the witness chair for the first time since taking the stand. His confident demeanor flickered almost imperceptibly, like a television screen experiencing momentary signal interference. Victoria Sterling's sharp green eyes narrowed as she studied Marcus with newfound wariness. Very well, Judge Thornton announced after a pause. 15-minute recess. Mr. Lawrence, you may step down temporarily, but you remain under oath. Marcus hurried from the courtroom with Rachel close behind him, his worn leather shoes squeaking against the marble floor as they made their way to a small conference room down the hall. The space was cramped and windowless, containing only a scarred wooden table and 4 mismatched chairs that had seen better decades. Marcus answered his phone with trembling hands, his voice barely steady as he spoke. This is Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, this is Detective Angela Reeves, formerly with the Chicago Police Department, now working as a private investigator specializing in financial fraud cases. I was hired by Rachel Martinez's family 3 weeks ago to investigate some irregularities they discovered in their financial records. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. Her family had never mentioned hiring any private investigator, and they certainly did not have the resources for such an expense. Marcus activated the phone's speaker function so Rachel could hear the conversation. I need to be direct with you, Mr. Webb, Detective Reeves continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to delivering shocking news. Everything that James Lawrence and his attorney have presented in court today is fabricated. The bank accounts, the trust documents, the investment statements, all of it is fraudulent. The conference room fell silent except for the humming of fluorescent lights overhead. Marcus removed his wire-rimmed glasses and cleaned them nervously, a gesture that had become habitual whenever he felt overwhelmed by a case's complexity. Can you be more specific about what you have discovered? Detective Reeves asked. I have spent the last 3 weeks conducting a comprehensive investigation into both the Martinez and Lawrence family financial histories. Rachel Martinez's family has never had any significant wealth beyond their small restaurant business, which generates modest but steady income for a working-class family. There has never been any Elena Martinez family trust, and the bank accounts being presented as evidence do not exist in any legitimate financial institution. Rachel felt a mixture of relief and confusion washing over her. Relief that someone had finally verified what she had known all along, but confusion about how such elaborate fraudulent documents had been created and why. More importantly, Detective Reeves continued, James Lawrence comes from a family with substantial generational wealth that he has been systematically hiding throughout his marriage and divorce proceedings. The Lawrence family controls multiple offshore accounts, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios worth approximately $180 million. Marcus dropped his glasses entirely, the wire frames clattering against the wooden table. Rachel grabbed the edge of her chair to steady herself as the detective's words sank in. $180 million. The number was so large that it seemed almost fictional. During his marriage to Rachel, James used her maiden name and personal information to create false financial accounts that gave the appearance of hidden wealth on her side. Meanwhile, he was receiving regular payments from his family's trust accounts, which he concealed by routing them through multiple shell companies and temporary accounts. The detective's voice became more urgent as she continued her explanation. I have copies of the real bank records, authenticated trust documents, and transfer histories that show James has been accessing family money throughout their marriage while simultaneously creating the false narrative that Rachel was the spouse with hidden assets. Rachel thought back to all the times during their marriage when James had mysteriously been able to afford expensive purchases despite claiming financial stress. The designer suits, the luxury car lease, the expensive restaurant meals that he insisted they could somehow afford. She had always assumed he was simply bad with money management, but now she realized he had been spending money from accounts she never knew existed. Detective Reeves, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as he processed the implications. Are you prepared to testify about your findings and provide documentation to the court? Absolutely. I am driving from Chicago right now and should arrive within the hour. I have brought comprehensive evidence that will completely demolish every claim that James Lawrence and his attorney have made. Additionally, I have discovered that this pattern of financial deception extends beyond just hiding assets. James has been systematically transferring money out of joint accounts that he shared with Rachel during their marriage, money that legally belonged to both spouses. Rachel suddenly understood why their joint savings account had always remained mysteriously low despite James's claims that his various business ventures were generating income. He had been moving money out of accounts that she could access and into hidden accounts controlled by his family's financial network. There is something else you need to know, Detective Reeves added, her tone becoming grave. I have uncovered evidence suggesting that the financial documents being presented in court today may constitute criminal fraud. The falsified bank statements and fabricated trust documents required sophisticated forgery and identity theft. This case may need to involve federal investigators if James and his attorney created fraudulent banking documents. Marcus was already reaching for his legal pad, scribbling notes as fast as his hand could move. Detective, do you have any evidence about who created these fraudulent documents? The investigation is ongoing, but I have strong reason to believe that Victoria Sterling's law firm has connections to financial service companies that specialize in creating official-looking documents for wealthy clients who need to hide assets during divorce proceedings. This may be part of a larger pattern of legal misconduct. Rachel felt a strange combination of vindication and fury building inside her chest. For months, She had been made to feel like she was crazy for insisting that she had never had access to any family wealth. James and his attorney had been so convincing in their presentations that she had begun to doubt her own memories and question whether she had somehow forgotten about financial resources that never existed. "Detective Reeves," Marcus said, his voice now carrying newfound confidence, "I need to file an emergency motion with the court immediately. Can you provide preliminary documentation that I can present to Judge Thornton within the next few minutes? I am sending you digital copies of the most critical evidence right now. Bank routing numbers for the accounts that James actually controls, copies of authentic Lawrence family trust documents, and forensic analysis showing how the falsified Martinez family records were created using Rachel's personal information without her knowledge or consent." Marcus's phone chimed repeatedly as electronic documents began arriving. Each new piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of James's elaborate deception, and Rachel could see her attorney's confidence growing as he reviewed the materials. "This changes everything," Marcus murmured, almost to himself. "We are not just dealing with hidden assets anymore. We are dealing with systematic fraud, identity theft, and possibly criminal conspiracy." When court resumed, the atmosphere in courtroom 3B had shifted dramatically. Marcus Webb returned to his table with a confidence that had been completely absent during the morning's proceedings, carrying a thick folder of documents that Detective Reeves had provided. Judge Thornton noticed the change immediately, her sharp brown eyes taking in the transformed demeanor of Rachel's previously overwhelmed attorney. "Your Honor," Marcus announced as he stood, his voice now steady and authoritative, "based on new evidence that has come to light during the recess, I am filing an emergency motion for the appointment of an independent forensic accountant to examine all financial documentation presented in these proceedings." Victoria Sterling's perfectly composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing a flash of genuine concern before she regained her professional mask. James shifted uncomfortably in the witness chair, his Italian leather shoes squeaking against the floor as he adjusted his position. "Mr. Webb," Judge Thornton replied, her tone indicating both curiosity and slight irritation, "this is highly unusual. What new evidence could possibly justify such a drastic measure at this stage of the proceedings?" Marcus approached the bench with the measured confidence of someone who finally held winning cards. "Your Honor, I have received credible evidence from a licensed private investigator suggesting that the financial documents presented by opposing counsel may be fraudulent. Given the serious nature of these allegations and the substantial monetary claims at stake, I believe the court requires independent expert analysis." Judge Thornton's silver eyebrows rose sharply. She had presided over hundreds of contentious divorce cases, but accusations of document fraud were rare and extremely serious. The implications extended far beyond simple asset hiding and into the realm of criminal misconduct. "Ms. Sterling," Judge Thornton addressed Victoria directly, "how do you respond to this allegation regarding the authenticity of your exhibits?" Victoria rose gracefully, but Rachel could see tension in the set of her shoulders that had not been present earlier. "Your Honor, these are clearly desperate tactics by opposing counsel. My client has provided comprehensive documentation from reputable financial institutions. Any suggestion of fraud is both baseless and irresponsible." "Nevertheless," Judge Thornton announced after a pause, "given the gravity of the allegations and the substantial amounts in question, I am granting Mr. Webb's motion. I am appointing certified forensic accountant Dr. Harrison Chun to conduct an immediate examination of all financial evidence presented by both parties." Dr. Chun was a distinguished man in his early 60s with silver-streaked black hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of scholarly authority. His reputation for uncovering financial deception had made him the court's preferred expert in complex divorce cases involving substantial assets. He had been waiting in the courthouse's witness room, having been called as soon as Marcus filed his emergency motion. Dr. Chin approached the witness stand with the measured pace of someone accustomed to delivering information that could change lives forever. After being sworn in, he opened a laptop computer and began connecting it to the courtroom's display system with practiced efficiency. "Your Honor," Dr. Chin began, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who dealt in facts rather than emotions, "I have conducted a comprehensive analysis of the financial documentation provided by both parties, as well as independent records obtained through proper legal channels. The large screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life, displaying what appeared to be a complex financial flowchart with multiple account numbers and transaction histories. Rachel squinted at the display, trying to make sense of the information that would determine her financial future. My investigation has revealed several critical discrepancies that require the court's immediate attention. First, the Elena Martinez Family Trust, which forms the foundation of Mr. Lawrence's alimony claim, does not exist in any legitimate financial institution's records. A collective gasp rose from the few observers in the courtroom's gallery. James gripped the arms of the witness chair, his knuckles turning white as Dr. Chun continued his methodical destruction of the carefully constructed lies. Furthermore, Dr. Chun clicked to the next slide, revealing a series of authentic banking records. My examination of legitimate financial institutions has uncovered the existence of multiple offshore accounts controlled by the Lawrence Family Trust, established in 1952 and currently valued at approximately $180 million. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victoria Sterling's face had gone pale, and she was frantically whispering to her assistant while shuffling through documents with increasing desperation. James looked like he might be sick, his previous confident demeanor completely evaporated. Dr. Chin advanced to the next display, showing a detailed timeline of financial transactions. During Mr. Lawrence's marriage to Ms. Martinez, he received regular monthly distributions from these family accounts totaling approximately $40,000 per month. These payments were disguised through a series of shell companies and temporary accounts designed to obscure their true source. Rachel felt her breath catch in her throat. $40,000 per month. During their marriage, James had claimed they were struggling financially while he was secretly receiving more money each month than most people earned in an entire year. Most significantly, Dr. Chun continued, his tone growing more grave. I have discovered evidence that Mr. Lawrence used Ms. Martinez's personal information, including her social security number and grandmother's name, to create falsified banking documents that gave the appearance of family wealth that never existed. Judge Thornton was taking careful notes, her expression growing increasingly stern as the full scope of James's deception became clear. The silver-haired judge had seen many cases of hidden assets, but the systematic fraud that Dr. Chun was describing exceeded anything in her considerable experience. Dr. Chin clicked to a new slide showing side-by-side comparisons of documents. On the left were the financial records that Victoria Sterling had presented as evidence of Rachel's hidden wealth. On the right were the same documents with forensic analysis highlighting the digital manipulation and fraudulent elements. These falsified documents required sophisticated software and detailed knowledge of banking protocols, Dr. Chin explained, his academic tone making the criminal implications even more chilling. The creation of such materials likely involved multiple individuals with expertise in financial document production. Victoria Sterling finally stood, her usual smooth confidence replaced by visible desperation. Your Honor, I object to this entire line of testimony. Dr. Chun was not provided with adequate time to conduct a proper forensic analysis, and his conclusions are based on incomplete information. Dr. Chun adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked directly at Victoria with the patience of a teacher correcting a struggling student. Ms. Sterling, I have had access to authenticated records from 12 different financial institutions, federal banking databases, and forensic analysis tools that can detect document manipulation down to the pixel level. My conclusions are based on the most comprehensive financial investigation possible under these circumstances. Judge Thornton's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Dr. Chun, in your professional opinion, do these findings suggest criminal conduct? Your Honor, the systematic creation of false financial documents, the use of another person's identity to fabricate banking records, and the concealment of substantial assets during divorce proceedings constitute multiple federal crimes including fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The courtroom fell completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. James had gone completely pale, and small beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead despite the cool temperature. Victoria Sterling was frantically taking notes, clearly trying to formulate some kind of damage control strategy. Dr. Chun continued with relentless precision. Additionally, my investigation has revealed that Ms. Martinez not only lacks any hidden assets, but that Mr. Lawrence systematically transferred money out of their joint marital accounts into his family's hidden financial network. Ms. Martinez is actually owed substantial restitution for funds that were wrongfully taken during their marriage. Judge Thornton set down her pen and looked directly at James with an expression that could have frozen fire. Mr. Lawrence, given these findings, I am immediately freezing all accounts identified by Dr. Chun pending a complete federal investigation. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. Judge Thornton's piercing brown eyes fixed on James with the intensity of a predator studying cornered prey. The silver-haired jurist had presided over thousands of cases during her 23-year career on the bench, but the systematic fraud that Dr. Chun had just exposed represented one of the most brazen attempts at courtroom deception she had ever witnessed. Mr. Lawrence, Judge Thornton's voice cut through the courtroom silence like a scalpel, you are still under oath. Dr. Chin's forensic analysis directly contradicts every aspect of your sworn testimony. I am giving you one final opportunity to explain these discrepancies before I hold you in contempt of court. James remained frozen in the witness chair, his charcoal suit now wrinkled from nervous perspiration. The confident businessman who had swaggered into the courtroom that morning had been replaced by a panicked man whose carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. His Italian leather shoes tapped nervously against the floor as he struggled to formulate a response that might salvage his disintegrating position. Your Honor, James began, his voice cracking slightly, there appears to be some sort of misunderstanding about the financial documentation. I was simply trying to protect Rachel from the burden of managing her family's complex financial arrangements. Judge Thornton's expression hardened visibly. The experienced jurist had heard every conceivable excuse and deflection during her career, but James's attempt to reframe systematic fraud as protective concern struck her as particularly insulting to the court's intelligence. Mr. Lawrence, are you seriously suggesting that you committed identity theft and document fraud to protect your ex-wife from financial responsibility? Judge Thornton asked, her tone dripping with judicial skepticism. Dr. Chin cleared his throat from the witness stand, drawing attention to the laptop screen that still displayed the damning financial evidence. Your Honor, if I may clarify the timeline of events, the falsified documents bearing Ms. Martinez's information were created and filed with financial institutions while she was completely unaware of their existence. This was not protection, it was deliberate deception. Victoria Sterling rose desperately from her table, her usual commanding presence reduced to barely controlled panic. Your Honor, my client may have been misguided in his approach, but his intentions were never malicious. The Lawrence family has always maintained complex financial structures for legitimate business and tax purposes. Judge Thornton turned her withering gaze toward the expensive attorney. Ms. Sterling, your client's family financial structures are not the issue here. The issue is that your client used his wife's identity to create fraudulent banking documents while simultaneously concealing $180 million in assets during divorce proceedings. Dr. Chin advanced to a new slide on his laptop, displaying a detailed chronology of James's financial deception. Your Honor, my analysis shows that Mr. Lawrence began creating the false Martinez family accounts within 6 months of filing for divorce. This demonstrates clear premeditation and planning rather than misguided protection. The forensic accountant's calm presentation of facts made James's situation even more dire. Each new piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of his credibility, and Rachel could see the desperation growing in his eyes as he realized that his elaborate scheme had been completely exposed. Your Honor, James tried again, his voice now betraying genuine fear. I may have made some poor decisions during a very emotional time, but I never intended to harm anyone. Rachel and I had a complicated relationship, and I was trying to ensure that we could both move forward with financial stability. Judge Thornton's patience finally reached its breaking point. The respected jurist had given James multiple opportunities to acknowledge his misconduct, but his continued attempts to minimize systematic fraud as poor decision-making had pushed her beyond tolerance. Mr. Lawrence, Judge Thornton's voice rose with controlled fury, stop insulting this court's intelligence. You did not make poor decisions during an emotional time. You orchestrated a sophisticated criminal conspiracy involving identity theft, document fraud, and money laundering that spans multiple years and involves millions of dollars. The courtroom had gone completely silent except for the sound of James's increasingly labored breathing. Victoria Sterling was frantically scribbling notes while occasionally glancing toward the exit as if calculating whether flight might be preferable to the professional destruction that was unfolding. Dr. Chun consulted his notes and addressed the court with academic precision. Your Honor, I have also discovered evidence that Mr. Lawrence's deception extends beyond just hiding assets. During his marriage to Ms. Martinez, he systematically transferred money from their joint accounts into his family's hidden network, effectively stealing marital assets that legally belonged to both spouses. Rachel felt a surge of vindication mixed with rage as the full scope of James's betrayal became clear. Not only had he lied about her having hidden wealth, but he had actually been stealing from their shared financial resources throughout their marriage. Every time she had worried about their mounting debt or suggested they needed to budget more carefully, James had been secretly moving money into accounts she never knew existed. Judge Thornton turned back to James with an expression that could have melted steel. Mr. Lawrence, Dr. Chin's investigation shows that you removed approximately $240,000 from joint marital accounts without your wife's knowledge or consent. How do you explain this theft? That was not theft, James protested weakly, his confident courtroom demeanor now completely shattered. Those were business investments that I was making for our future financial security. Rachel knew that I was pursuing various entrepreneurial opportunities. Dr. Chin's response was swift and devastating. Your Honor, the money was not invested in any legitimate business ventures. It was transferred directly into Lawrence family trust accounts where it remains today, earning interest for Mr. Lawrence's benefit while Ms. Martinez struggled to pay basic living expenses. Victoria Sterling made one final desperate attempt to salvage her client's position. Your Honor, my client's family has extensive business holdings and complex financial arrangements that may have created confusion about the source and ownership of various accounts. Judge Thornton had heard enough. Ms. Sterling, your client did not create confusion about account ownership. He created fraudulent documents, stole his wife's identity, and committed systematic financial crimes while lying under oath in this courtroom. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. James suddenly stood up from the witness chair, his composure finally cracking completely. Your Honor, you do not understand the pressure I was under. My family expected me to maintain certain standards, and Rachel was never going to be able to contribute the kind of financial stability that our lifestyle required. The admission hung in the courtroom air like toxic gas. James had just confessed that his entire marriage had been based on financial manipulation and that he had viewed Rachel as inadequate rather than as an equal partner. The mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the arrogant, entitled mindset that had driven his criminal behavior. Dr. Chin looked up from his laptop with the satisfied expression of someone whose meticulous work had achieved its intended result. Your Honor, that confession confirms my analysis. Mr. Lawrence viewed his marriage as a financial arrangement rather than a partnership, and when divorce became inevitable, he chose criminal fraud rather than honest disclosure of assets. Judge Thornton rose from her bench, her black robes flowing as she prepared to deliver judgment on the most brazen case of courtroom fraud in her judicial career. The silver-haired judge's voice carried the authority of decades of legal experience as she addressed the stunned courtroom. Mr. Lawrence, in 23 years on this bench, I have never witnessed such systematic and calculated contempt for the legal system. You have committed perjury, fraud, identity theft, and theft of marital assets. I am immediately referring this case to federal prosecutors and ordering your arrest for contempt of court. The bailiff moved toward James with practiced efficiency, his weathered hands reaching for the handcuffs that hung from his leather belt. James stood frozen beside the witness chair, his expensive charcoal suit now wrinkled and damp with perspiration as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his shock. The confident businessman who had entered the courtroom that morning was gone, replaced by a trembling man whose elaborate scheme had collapsed spectacularly. Before we proceed with the arrest, Judge Thornton announced, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority that had been building throughout the proceedings, I want this court record to reflect the full scope of the misconduct that has been perpetrated here today." The silver-haired jurist remained standing behind her imposing bench, her sharp brown eyes surveying the courtroom with the satisfaction of someone who had witnessed justice prevailing over sophisticated deception. The morning's proceedings had revealed layers of criminal behavior that exceeded anything in her considerable experience. "Mr. Lawrence, you entered this courtroom demanding $8,000 per month in spousal support based on testimony and documentation that we now know to be completely fraudulent. You swore an oath to tell the truth, then proceeded to deliver a performance of lies so elaborate and systematic that it constitutes criminal conspiracy." Victoria Sterling remained seated at her table, her burgundy suit no longer projecting the confidence that had characterized her morning presentation. The expensive attorney was frantically gathering documents while occasionally glancing toward the courtroom exit, clearly calculating the professional damage that would result from her association with such massive fraud. "Dr. Chun," Judge Thornton continued, "your forensic analysis has provided this court with irrefutable evidence of financial crimes that extend far beyond simple asset hiding. The systematic creation of false documents, the theft of Ms. Martinez's identity, and the concealment of $180 million in family assets represent federal crimes that carry substantial prison sentences." The forensic accountant nodded gravely from the witness stand, his laptop still displaying the damning financial evidence that had destroyed James's credibility. The academic precision with which he had presented his findings had made James's guilt impossible to deny or minimize. Furthermore, Judge Thornton's voice grew more stern as she addressed the broader implications of the case. "This court is deeply troubled by the possibility that Ms. Sterling's law firm may have been complicit in creating or presenting fraudulent documentation. I am ordering a full investigation into the source of the falsified banking records and trust documents." Victoria Sterling finally stood, her usual smooth confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. "Your Honor, I was provided with these documents by my client and had no reason to doubt their authenticity. Sterling and Associates has always maintained the highest ethical standards." Dr. Chin cleared his throat diplomatically. "Your Honor, my investigation suggests that the creation of such sophisticated fraudulent documents would require resources and expertise that extend beyond what a single individual could accomplish. The banking letterheads, account numbers, and transaction histories were created using professional-grade software and detailed knowledge of financial institution protocols." Judge Thornton made notes on her legal pad, her expression indicating that the investigation into possible legal misconduct would be thorough and unforgiving. The implications extended far beyond James's individual crimes and into potential systemic corruption within the legal profession. "Now, regarding the matter of restitution and asset distribution," Judge Thornton announced, turning her attention to the financial remedies that Rachel deserved after years of systematic deception. "Ms. Martinez, you have been the victim of unprecedented financial fraud and emotional manipulation. This court is prepared to ensure that justice is both swift and comprehensive." Rachel sat at her table beside Marcus Webb, still struggling to process the complete reversal of her situation. That morning she had entered the courtroom expecting to be ordered to pay substantial alimony to a man who had systematically stolen from her throughout their marriage. Now she was learning that she was entitled to restitution from a family fortune that dwarfed anything she had ever imagined. Based on Dr. Chin's analysis, Judge Thornton continued, "Mr. Lawrence removed approximately $240,000 from joint marital accounts without your knowledge or consent. Additionally, he received over $2 million in family trust distributions during your marriage while claiming financial hardship. These funds constitute marital property that should have been disclosed and divided during divorce proceedings." Marcus Webb was taking careful notes, his earlier nervousness replaced by professional satisfaction at witnessing such complete vindication of his client. The court-appointed attorney had never handled a case where the evidence of wrongdoing was so overwhelming and the reversal of fortune so dramatic. Therefore, Judge Thornton announced with judicial finality, "This court orders the immediate transfer of $4 million from Lawrence family trust accounts to Ms. Martinez as compensation for stolen marital assets, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Additionally, Mr. Lawrence and his family are responsible for all legal fees incurred by Ms. Martinez during these proceedings. The number $4 million seemed to hang in the courtroom air like thunder. Rachel felt dizzy as she tried to comprehend the magnitude of the financial justice being delivered. James had demanded $8,000 per month from her, but she was receiving a single payment that exceeded what most people earned in multiple lifetimes. Furthermore, Judge Thornton continued, Dr. Chin's investigation has revealed ongoing financial obligations that Mr. Lawrence concealed during divorce proceedings. The Lawrence Family Trust has been funding Mr. Lawrence's lifestyle to the tune of $40,000 per month, income that should have been considered during the original divorce settlement. James remained standing beside the witness chair, his face ashen as Judge Thornton systematically dismantled every aspect of his financial deception. The Italian leather shoes that had clicked so confidently across the courtroom floor that morning now seemed to anchor him in place as his world collapsed around him. Dr. Chun, Judge Thornton addressed the forensic accountant directly. Your investigation indicates that the Lawrence family has been aware of Mr. Lawrence's deception and may have actively facilitated the creation of fraudulent documents. I am ordering subpoenas for all Lawrence family members who had knowledge of these financial arrangements. Your Honor, Dr. Chun replied with academic precision, my analysis of trust account management and family communication records suggests that at least 3 family members had direct knowledge of the false Martinez accounts and the systematic transfer of marital assets into Lawrence family control. The courtroom doors opened quietly as Detective Angela Reeves entered, her professional attire and confident demeanor immediately identifying her as law enforcement. The private investigator whose phone call had initiated the dramatic reversal of the morning's proceedings now carried additional documentation that would seal James's fate. Your Honor, Detective Reeves approached the bench with the measured pace of someone accustomed to delivering crucial evidence. I have just received confirmation from federal prosecutors that they are prepared to file charges against Mr. Lawrence for money laundering, fraud, and identity theft. Additionally, they are investigating possible RICO violations related to the systematic use of family trust accounts to conceal criminal activity. Victoria Sterling finally abandoned any pretense of representing James's interests and began gathering her materials with obvious intention to distance herself from the unfolding criminal investigation. The expensive attorney's career had been built on representing wealthy clients in complex financial matters, but association with federal criminal charges threatened everything she had worked to achieve. Mr. Lawrence, Judge Thornton's voice cut through the courtroom tension with the finality of a judge who had witnessed enough deception for one lifetime. You are hereby found in contempt of court for perjury and systematic fraud. You are sentenced to 6 months in county jail pending federal prosecution for the multiple felonies that Dr. Chin's investigation has revealed. The bailiff stepped forward with practiced efficiency, his handcuffs gleaming under the courtroom's fluorescent lighting. James offered no resistance as the metal restraints clicked into place around his wrists, the sound echoing through the silent courtroom like punctuation marks on his fallen empire. Additionally, Judge Thornton continued, I am issuing a permanent restraining order preventing Mr. Lawrence or any member of his family from contacting Ms. Martinez or attempting to interfere with the court-ordered asset transfers. Any violation of this order will result in additional criminal charges and extended incarceration. As James was led toward the courtroom exit, photographers from local news outlets captured images of his perp walk, the expensive suit now a costume for his public humiliation. The man who had demanded spousal support that morning was now facing decades in federal prison, while his victim received millions in restitution. Ms. Martinez, Judge Thornton addressed Rachel directly, her tone softening slightly as she spoke to the woman who had endured systematic financial abuse. This court apologizes for the trauma you have experienced during these proceedings. The justice system failed to protect you from sophisticated fraud, but I hope today's outcome demonstrates that truth ultimately prevails over deception. Rachel stood on trembling legs, still struggling to comprehend the complete transformation of her circumstances. That morning, she had been a struggling single woman facing financial ruin, and now she possessed resources that would ensure security for the rest of her life. Mr. Webb, Judge Thornton continued, addressing Marcus with judicial appreciation, Your dedication to uncovering the truth in this case reflects the highest ideals of the legal profession. Your client's vindication is a testament to your thorough investigation and commitment to justice. Marcus Webb removed his wire-rimmed glasses and cleaned them carefully, a gesture that now seemed more thoughtful than nervous. The court-appointed attorney had never handled a case with such dramatic reversal of fortune, and the professional satisfaction was evident in his improved posture and confident expression. 6 months later, the local newspaper's front page featured a photograph of James Lawrence in federal prison Orange, accompanied by an article detailing his sentencing to 15 years for financial fraud and money laundering. The article also mentioned that Rachel Martinez had used her restitution settlement to establish a foundation providing legal assistance to victims of domestic financial abuse. Rachel herself had moved into a comfortable apartment in a safe neighborhood, far from the cramped quarters where she had struggled during the divorce proceedings. The foundation's offices occupied the top floor of a downtown building, where a team of attorneys and financial experts helped other victims navigate the complex process of uncovering hidden assets and financial deception. Dr. Harrison Chun had accepted a position as the foundation's chief forensic accountant, using his expertise to train other professionals in detecting the sophisticated fraud techniques that predatory spouses employed to hide assets. His academic precision and thorough investigation methods had become the gold standard for financial forensic work in divorce proceedings. Marcus Webb had received recognition from the State Bar Association for his work on the case, and his court-appointed practice had evolved into a boutique firm specializing in complex divorce cases involving hidden assets. The confidence he had gained during Rachel's case had transformed his entire approach to legal practice. Victoria Sterling's law firm had faced federal investigation and eventual dissolution after prosecutors discovered that the fraudulent documents in Rachel's case were part of a larger pattern of creating false financial records for wealthy divorce clients. Sterling herself had been disbarred and faced criminal charges for her role in the conspiracy. Detective Angela Reeves had expanded her private investigation practice to focus exclusively on uncovering financial fraud in divorce cases. Her meticulous work in exposing the Lawrence family's criminal behavior had established her reputation as the premier investigator for victims of systematic financial deception. The foundation that Rachel established continued to grow, helping hundreds of individuals discover hidden assets and hold their abusers accountable for financial crimes. Each successful case served as proof that sophisticated deception, no matter how elaborate or well-funded, would ultimately be exposed by thorough investigation and unwavering commitment to truth. Justice had not only been served, but had created lasting change that protected future victims from the kind of systematic financial abuse that James Lawrence had perfected and weaponized against the woman he had promised to love and honor.